Hooray! Oh my goodness, we really are live on YouTube. How amazing. Here we are. Here we are. How do you do? Except for now, I'm watching myself. It's obviously a lag, isn't there? Hooray! Oh my goodness, we really are live on YouTube. How amazing. Here we are. Here we are. How do you do? Right. Except for now, I'm watching myself. It's obviously a lag, isn't there? Hooray! Oh my goodness, we really are live on YouTube. How amazing. Here we are. Here we are. How do you do? Right. Except for now, I'm watching myself. It's obviously a lag, isn't there? Hooray! Oh my goodness, we really are live on YouTube. I'm so entertained. Right. I'm so entertained. Why is it trying that on left? I don't understand. Right, I don't know if this is working. Anyway, I am waiting for Angela to join me. And our amazing guest is here. How phenomenal. Woohoo! Yes. Hooray. Happy day. She's on her way. Hello, Miss Red. We're live on YouTube, Miss Red. But nothing more authentic than seeing you combing your tresses. Am I quite audible?
You're audible to me, yes.
Marvelous. Oh, I thought you might keep your hair down. It's beautiful. We're live on YouTube at the moment because Facebook wouldn't let me post on my own group, which is very silly. Oh dear. Anyhow, yes. Without making too much of a ruckus, I'm going to tell people in my group that we are actually live on YouTube, but they won't know where to find me because I don't even know what my channel's called. Anyway, we are live on YouTube. Search.
Can I turn this into a podcast?
Yeah. It's all on YouTube for us.
Excellent.
It's live on YouTube. I'm just hoping that it's recording it. It ought to be recording it for us. Yeah, we can definitely check that. You look amazing. You look very regal and guru-like, and your lipstick matches your dress and your chair. It's amazing. Right. The sad thing is you can't see my little cat ears.
Oh, very nice.
My t-shirt.
Very cute.
Shall we get cracking? Let's get a wriggle on with our amazing most informative session with the incredible Angela Lansbury, who is a prolific writer and speaker It's a very rare combination, isn't it? Someone who loves to write and speak. Most people either write and then they speak reluctantly. Oh, look at all these. Amazing. Gosh. That isn't a ton of masterpieces. I don't know what is. Gosh, we are lucky to have you in our lives, in our worlds. And what was I saying? I was on about something. Yes, travel writer and amazing cheerer-upper on Facebook and incredibly entertaining speaker. Always has the most amazing props, the most incredible. You use props incredibly inventively, like your chef's hat and the the massive great. Was it an emu egg? What egg was it we had last time? Was it ostrich egg? Was it? Was it an ostrich egg or a? There we are. A bunny rabbit.
I can go and get the ostrich egg if you like.
Oh yes, please do. That'd be fun.
Right. It will now be a short interlude.
Yes, I'll just keep on ranting about how wonderful you are. Yes, I will sing her praises to the high heavens and blow her trumpet for her. So Angela and I met in Facebook. No, we didn't meet in Facebook. We met in real life at Toastmasters. And made great friends. And we're both, well, her more than me these days, because I tend to stay in my own zone, my own lane. But we're both quite active as language evaluators, and Angela does a lot of visiting of other clubs. I only visit one other club besides my two. What else can I say? She, yes.
That's the ostrich egg.
Ah, amazing. Love it.
It is from South Africa.
It's even got South Africa on it. Jenny, I love that.
But I turn it round the other way, so it's just an egg.
Yeah, to suit your purposes.
I gave a speech on how to cook an egg.
We'll need a speech on how to use props in Facebook. I mean, in Facebook, props in speeches.
And indeed, we can indeed.
Now, Angela, fill the front. You're not from Mexico, are you?
I'm from the UK. I'm from the UK. But I'm now in Singapore, and I have been for 20 years. So here's my Singapore hat. This is, I'm surprised you said Mexican. I assumed it was a cowgirl hat.
It is a cowgirl hat, my dear. I just saw the wide rim and I just went Mexican.
And let's ignore the Chinese. I presume this is Chinese. What does it say? Li Qiang. Maybe it's Japanese.
How awesome. Konnichiwa.
Konnichiwa. Hello.
Oh yes, Angela's also a master language learner.
Yes. I'm an aspiring polyglot.
Well, that's kind of relative, isn't it? It's kind of arguable.
Right. Chérie. C'est bien, c'est très bien.
Oui, c'est super, c'est magnifique. Right, madam, I have some questions for you to address at your leisure and pleasure.
Yes.
And I think the first question is something I'm not expecting. How did you come to start writing?
I've written since the age of 11 when I wrote my first poem about the 11 plus.
Which is an exam for the friends who don't know.
Oh yes, what do they call it here? PSLE or something.
Right. Indeed.
Something about never take a rest until you pass the 11 plus test. And always do your best. It just rhymed on and on. My parents thought it was wonderful.
Make it your quest. Yeah, I did the common entrance, you see.
Right. Yes.
One of those things. Yeah. There we go. And so we're talking about overcoming writer's block and other delights.
Yes, I wanted to be a writer when I read Enid Blyton. Thank you very much.
Oh, very good. I loved Enid Blyton. Love her. I read the whole Secret Seven series when I was ill with the mumps when I was about 7, I think.
Wonderfully alliterative titles, all of them. Famous Five, Secret Seven.
Faraway Tree.
Yes, I've just written a book on alliteration, which not yet published, but will be shortly. And I can get my head round the technique for doing heading 1, heading 2, heading 3. And
ask our publisher, ask Elle, who's publishing it?
Moment Me, self-publishing.
Marvelous. That sounds fantastic. Look forward to it. Alliteration, indeed.
Right. Yeah. Okay, let's try and stick to something focused, as I'm easily led astray.
They're very interesting, that's why. And we have this incredible synergy. And so I think it's just going to be interesting because people just be so like, gosh, what an amazing conversation. Right, okay, yes, I wasn't trying to derail us.
Oh. Should we be coordinated?
No, we can be coordinated. That's marvelous. Yes, good job. Very good. And why do you believe that people should? 2 questions in one. Yes. Why should people start to write? Like, what should be the impetus to for somebody starting to write?
There are 2 reasons to write. One is to know yourself, and the other is to help others. Oh, the third is to make money. And just to be famous.
Yes, to be famous. And many people say,
Four.
When will I be famous? Okay, not to sing too much.
Most people write when they're retired, they write their life story to try and get a grip on where they've been, why they've gone the way they have, and what they can now tell others as a sideline.
Marvelous. Yes.
It's extremely useful and extremely important. You fill in all the gaps and you find things which explain yourself and your family, which I found. For example, I knew that my great uncle had died of flu, and then I was looking back and through the family history to find out when he died, and guess which year he died? 1918. I thought I never knew anyone who died of the 1918 flu. He didn't just die of the flu, he died of the 1918 flu. So now when I read about the 1918 flu, I immediately think of my grandmother's brother and my mother's uncle. It suddenly has a personal relevance to me. So that's very important. And another one that I turned up when doing my family history, I was trying to connect up, for the majority of readers in the world of the English language are going to be in America, because that's where the majority of English speaking people and internet users are. And I discovered when I wrote my blog that I had all these readers in America, whatever subject I was writing about. And I said to my husband, why is everyone reading in America? Why isn't it in England? And he said, that's because that's where all the people are. So I tried to think, what can I write about that's interesting to Americans when I wrote my novel based on the family history? And I found Singer, who invented the sewing machines. And I was thinking, oh, it's a pity I haven't got anybody in my family who knew about Singer. Then I went to dinner with my late mother-in-law, Pearl, and I was, unbeknown to her, writing her family history.
That's a bit blurry, darling. Oh, yes, hold up.
I wrote her family history for her 90th birthday party. And I was talking to her over dinner and I said, and tell me about your father and your grandfather. And then she said, oh yes, he died young, and the company sent a picture to him. And I said, what did the picture say? And she said, the picture said many thanks for all your years working for the Singer Sewing Machine Company. I said, what? He worked for Singer Sewing Machine Company. Ties all my family history together with the history of the sewing machine. You may have seen Fiddler on the Roof and how it transformed people's lives, because instead of having to sew slowly, they could churn out dresses and earn twice as much money. And it turned the poverty-stricken people into the middle classes, people who had no homes into people who had homes. So that was the revolution. And that was what I found out when researching my family history. So it's fun and it's full of happy revelations. Of course, 1918 flu was not exactly a happy revelation, but it's something that ties you in with history. As soon as you look into your great grandparents, obviously they're all dead. You cannot. That's the way it is. But to find out facts about them is always a joy. Sorry, back to you. What's the next question?
I think that's incredible. So yeah, you never know what you might unearth when you go looking for salient facts and figures.
So I just remembered your question was, why should you write a book? So that's why a lot of people write books, to try and get a grip on their own life and make sense of it and see how their ancestors led them to where they are today, and how the whole family, it's like a checkerboard. You see people related to each other, and suddenly from just everything being a random mess, everything seems to be in order, and you feel in control. And you feel when people ask you a question, who are you, where are you from, you can give them a definitive answer.
Isn't that fantastic? So my next question is, so for books like your upcoming book on alliteration, right? That is what some people might call an authority book. Very similar to the book that your chapter is going to be part of, which is called Fear in Us, and we'll blather on about that later. But Angela and I got into one of our wonderful conversations, and it will never end because there's so many branches. But I will try and be a little bit focused because you're here as a special guest today. And the next question is, so for somebody who finds that they don't have time to write, or they don't really have that compelling why to write, what would you advise them?
I would suggest you start by doing what I did and do a family history of a grandparent or a parent if there's nobody else, yourself. And it writes itself if you do it in chronological order. And if you interview somebody like an aunt or parent or grandparent or even a cousin, just get it in little chunks. We used to go to dinner every Sunday night, and I would ask a simple question like, where did you go to school? And then I'd get a simple answer. And then somehow through the meal, they'd come up with, oh, I didn't tell you, we did so and so. I'd say, well, did you do sewing at school? Did you learn to read? Were you any good at spelling? Which school did you go to? And it just, the questions just come naturally and lead on. And some of them are not unexpected, but they are all of interest to somebody, because sometimes the school is still there and that's of interest, and sometimes it's gone away and you've got news about something that nobody else will know about, which your great-grandchildren will never know about. So that can be interesting. And then you come up with totally surprising things. For example, I asked my father, what did you have for lunch when you were at school? And he said, my mother in winter, she gave me a potato, and in summer she gave me an apple. And in winter, I had the baked potato, she would heat it up, and I'd keep it in my pocket, and there was no heating, so it kept me warm all morning until I ate it at lunchtime.
Wow.
And I thought, my goodness, how life has changed. But he would never have normally told me if I hadn't just asked this really boring sounding question, what did you have for, at school for lunch? And it came up with this story, which was a surprise, because he ate so little and there was no heating in the school, and that you kept your hands on your lunch to keep warm. It was just so visual and so of the era.
That's incredible.
It also explained my father, why he's so frugal, and why my father would lay the meal on the table and he would say thank you, completely opposite to my son, who would jump up and say, I don't want to eat this, I want to eat pizza. Which was, my father said, was unthinkable in his day. There was only one meal. Your mother or your father went to the market, bought whatever was going, which might be meat or fish, brought it back, and everybody ate it. And at the end or at the beginning, you said thank you for cooking the meal or making the meal.
Exactly.
And no question of jumping around and saying, I don't want to eat this, I want to eat that. How life has changed.
Very much so. That is absolutely fascinating.
And that's what you will find out if you start asking ordinary questions of yourself or your families, especially families overseas. Now is your chance to go on Zoom.
Yeah.
Say, what did you have for breakfast?
Yeah.
They might be having porridge, but in Singapore, it's going to be rice porridge.
Yes.
In England, in London, it's going to be porridge with sugar. And in Scotland, it's made with oats. And in Scotland, it's going to be porridge made with oats, but served with salt instead of sugar.
Right.
So just the perfectly ordinary question will bring up quite surprising answers.
Yeah, I mean, having a curious mind and an inquisitive mind makes all the difference, doesn't it? You know, absolutely. I won't go into that because I can get quite judgmental about video games. Instead of, you know, a child satisfying his or her own curiosity. You mentioned Anne Frank to me, and I'd like you to elaborate to the friends, her, you know, all about how she inspired other people and how crucial she was, and her diary, obviously, was to the evolution and inspiration of various other very key people in history. Could you tell us a bit about that?
First of all, the diary wasn't a diary, it was just a big notebook. It didn't say diary and the year on it. It was a notebook, but she decided to keep a diary because she had nothing else to do. So she started her diary. And anybody can do this. And you might say, well, I don't do anything, I don't go anywhere, I haven't traveled this year. Compare yourself with Anne Frank. Where did she go? She didn't travel. She didn't leave her four walls. She couldn't even speak or flush the toilet in daylight. And yet she managed to write a compelling diary. Then you might say, oh, well, anybody could do that. If you were stuck in wartime, then you've got a story, haven't you? Well, no, that's not true. They tried to make a book out of diaries of 5 other children from the same era, and I read them. And frankly, I was bored. They were just not as entrancing as her diary. So you don't need to do anything exciting. You just need to make it interesting by capturing the people, the conversations, your emotions, your hopes for the future, and your wishes and the happy thoughts. The thing that really comes across about Anne Frank is the happy things she said despite the privations.
And the circumstances, yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, many people would sort of equate it or, you know, say, oh, we're in similar situations now. I mean, we've been in and out of lockdown, as have people in pretty much every other part of the world, haven't we?
If you had kept a diary for 6 months before lockdown and then the 6 months after, that would have been a very interesting diary because you would have seen the difference.
Yeah, that's true. I suppose because, well, I mean, I blog a lot on Facebook. You know, do you think that's similar?
Yes, I mean, if you had the time and the effort and the energy, you could go back and you could pick the day that COVID started and pick the same day a year earlier, and you could put the 2 entries above and below in a book and put how the year that changed everything. And then you could do it in 3 sections: 1 the previous year, then the COVID year, and then your comments underneath how life improved or didn't improve. Now my life improved because I'm a recluse, and
really?
Yes, I was knocked down by a car in 1984, and for a very long time I couldn't lift my arm, somebody else had to cut up my food. I couldn't leave the house. And for years afterwards, I was afraid to go out. And I managed to hide this from most people. I had au pair girls, and they would do the shopping or collect the post and buy the stamps. And then when my husband was around, he would take me out. But I didn't like driving, and I still don't. So for me, being here online, speaking to you, is one of the modern miracles.
Yeah.
It just wouldn't, this wasn't happening before COVID-19. We didn't go onto the screen and talk to 50 people same time. We didn't reach out to so many people. At least I did.
Well, yeah. Well, I didn't know that whole story about you being knocked down by a car, and I'll have to ask you about it later. But what was I going to say? Yes, I mean, people did do podcasts before this, but of course now we've, with the, I hate the phrase, the new normal, more people are pivoting, aren't they, to being online and doing things. So you can reach a lot more people. We can attend Toastmasters meetings in anywhere we want, can't we?
But Toastmasters meetings are very focused. You're asked to think of a theme for the day, which may or may not be seasonal. I mean, obvious ones like Christmas is Christmas, and February can be Valentine's Day, or it can be love, and middle of the year can be summer or holidays. If you're in a country with seasons. And then you realize that it's very different in other countries, and that people are at different times of day. You have to say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, because people can now watch you from all over the world. So
it's also time zone.
You really have to think of the listener and the reader all the time. So that's one thing that's changed.
Yeah, which comes back to my question, about Anne Frank, and I'll fill in this little bit because you mentioned it to me before, about how her diary was an inspiration to Nelson Mandela.
Yes.
I love that story. So would you?
One of my famous sayings from her, which was put up in Harrow in the Civic Centre in the meeting area. Her saying was, how wonderful it is that we do not have to wait a single day to start improving the world or changing the world. And what a wonderful thing to say when you're stuck in a room in the middle of nowhere, unable to even open the curtains and look out. So she said wonderful things, and her diary was read as a form of encouragement by Nelson Mandela when he was in prison, like her. So he had somebody who was in the same situation as him, encouraging him. And I seem to remember that he said the other inspiration he found was a poem that many people like, Invictus, by W.E. Henley.
Yes.
I am the captain of my soul. And when I read it, I thought, how clever to have come up with this phrase. And then I read his life story, which you can read in Wikipedia quite easily. And I was shocked to find that he wrote this to give himself courage the night before he had part of his leg amputated. And he was a very inspiring man. He had a friend called Robert Louis Stevenson, who you may remember the baddie, but a kind of goody baddie, a black and white character. Long John Silver was a man who walked around with a crutch because he had a leg he was limping about. And that was based on R.L. Stevenson's friend Henley, who'd written the poem, which was an inspiration, is still an inspiration to many people. It would be lovely if I and you and all our friends could write something inspiring. And the first thing you write might not be the perfect thing. I used to belong to a writers group, and they split up into a novelist group. And I said, oh, can I join your novelist group? I've just written my first novel. And they said, so sorry, our novelist group is only for people who've written 5 novels, because it's not really until you get to your 5th novel that you're really an expert and really can make proper comments on other people about the structure of a novel and how it should go.
What?
5 novels. And I think back to Charlotte Bronte. She wrote 4 books, which one was a kind of rewrite of another. So
Wow.
she didn't even write the 5 books, really. She really wrote 4 books.
Right.
She would have been rejected by my writer's circle because she wasn't.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's the thing, you know, many musicians do that, don't they? They sort of rehash, for want of a more polite word, their old material into new material, don't they? And it's just sort of a different mix of all these mixes and things.
I have a friend from both my writing groups in England, Writers' Holiday and Writers' Summer School, and she's written books on how to write poetry, and she says you put down a poem and come back to it and rewrite it, and the trick is to come back and rewrite it, but not to rewrite it forever. Now, I've got a couple of quotations in my own book on poetry. The most useful thing here is the quotations at the beginning. For example, always be a poet, even in prose, by Baudelaire, French Baudelaire. And then Oscar Wilde, very quotable man, said, "A poet can survive everything but a misprint."
Indeed.
And the one I was going to read to you was by Paul Valéry, another French poet. He said, "A poem is never finished, only abandoned."
Oh, that one.
Not abandon it, please finish it.
Can you say that about anything, though? I mean, you know, we polish and polish and polish things and never know when to stop. It's a bit like a speech, really. So could you help us understand when a good time to stop is?
Way to stop is to have a deadline. Or alternatively, to go back to the old-fashioned blog. The blog is you write something every day. It's like a weblog, it's a diary online.
Yeah.
So if you wrote a poem every day, now Alison Chisholm, who I was talking to you about before, she once came to us and she said, "I want you to write a poem every month." And she constructed a little booklet made out of different colored paper and put a ribbon in it and tied it together. And each of us got a different one. And she said, well, there are 12 pages, write a different poem in here every month.
Wow.
And then bring it back to me next year and we'll look at it together. And if supposing you were to write the poem every day or just once a month, come back to it in a year's time, you could then do a revised version and compare the two, or you could hide the original version and put up the better version.
Right.
You can either look at it negatively and say, "Oh my God, what an awful poem I wrote," or you can say, "Gosh, what progress I've made.
Yes.
I can now look at this poem and I can see I can improve the title, I can improve the rhythm, I can improve the rhyme. Look how much progress I have made." So look at it positively if you can look back on things and think,
Well, I think people move on, don't they? I mean, we just change. That's our evolution. I choose to say, well, that was me then. This is me now, you know. And I do write a poem every week for our wonderful Parole. Parole is one of the other writers. Her chapter 4, if I'm not mistaken. We'll see. And she writes about fear in general, but in this book. And we have a poetry evening every Thursday evening. I must share those details with you. But I would love you to write a poem for this book, because like I've written a couple, and normally we have a poem in between each chapter, but not for this book because there are too many chapters. But you can put a poem in your chapter if you like.
Ah,
What I'll be doing. Yes.
oh,
I
right,
did one
I'll
on
do
fear
that.
itself,
Oh,
yes.
yes. Oh, yes, that's a very popular subject, really, for poets, is about writing or the fear of writing.
Absolutely.
It eventually becomes boring, but what's boring to somebody who's been around in the field for 20 years is fresh and new to somebody who's just starting out.
Very much so. So I have a little confession at this point. I mean, I have put it in the previous books, but I haven't said it out loud per se. Is that these anthologies were originally a step in my journey to becoming a writer myself, because as you know, I love speaking, because I taught the hind legs of a donkey, and sometimes quite intelligently. And I taught public speaking for 10 years. But what are you frowning?
Could you repeat that about the donkey?
I could talk the hind legs off a donkey.
Oh, right. Thank you.
You're aware of that.
How you could talk the hind legs off a donkey, but
let's compete one day. Anyway.
Perhaps it would gallop off. I think it's from the old idea that you used to pin them on a board. I'm not
I don't know, my dear. I didn't think we'd be discussing that kind of phrase. It was just used very flippantly. However, in my quest to becoming a writer, because the way my mind works, it's not very organized, right? So I can organize a speech, but not speak and write. So this whole project, these anthologies, this is a set of 6 books, is all to do with me trying to achieve an ulterior motive while being of service in itself. So that's one way to just get started on something you're passionate about and grow from there, or get some other authors to join you, right, in a worthy cause. And what about other things where you're not writing for your own sake, you're writing to inform somebody of something, or to provide them with information that they need, like writing to a solicitor when something upsetting has happened, when it's a chore?
The only thing you can do with that is to make it as simple as possible. Work out what you want to say, such as, I would like to close this bank account. And then which bank account is it? What name is it in? Then you look at the previous letter from them to see whether they start, "Dear Mrs. So-and-so," in which case you would reply, "Dear Mr. So-and-so," and
Yes.
their wording.
Right.
And then you work out how soon they need to have the information. Is it urgent that you deliver it today? In which case you could drop it in at the door and say, "Sorry, it's just a one-liner. I thought we needed this information, so I brought it." Or you could spend days rewriting it. When my beloved uncle Ronnie died, I found he had a book like this, and he would have 4 different versions of every letter he wrote on an A4 page, and it would say, Dear Mr. So-and-so, I'm writing to thank you. Dear Mr. So-and-so, I'm writing to say how much I appreciate. My dear friend, I do so appreciate." And it would go on, and I think, oh my goodness, my poor uncle, he struggled so hard just to do a letter. In a sense, we all do this. We all think it through. Some people do and some people don't. Some people send off a WhatsApp message. "Why do you do blah, 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 blah?" And suddenly the other person comes back, "How dare you insult me?" And a whole hoo-ha. And then other people come in. "He wasn't insulting you. Why are you so easily offended? He didn't mean it. Why do we have to listen to your private conversation?" And it goes on and on and on and on. So, and then you think, well, why didn't they just wait a minute? There's a phrase that's attributed to Mark Twain, something, "When you're feeling angry, count to 10 before you say anything or before you write anything."
Yeah.
The other version is, "Don't send anything off on the day you feel angry, wait till the next day and read it again."
Yes.
And the other one is, when you write something to someone else, think how you would feel if they said it to you.
Mm.
And I remember a really funny one, or at least it's funny now. It wasn't funny at the time. I went to join a new club, and the treasurer was a very serious and straightforward man. He said, am I right that you want to join our club? And I wrote, yes. And he replied, why do you want to join our club? Oh my goodness, he thinks, he's the person who speaks English correctly. Why is another person interfering, treading on his toes, invading his club? And I was really scared, and I spent, hours.
Good Lord.
Why do I want to join his club? Because so and so invited me, because it helps your club, because I thought it would help me. What should I say? What
Yes.
should I say?
Why do people normally join clubs? Yeah.
Later on, I looked at the joining form and discovered that one of the questions is, why do you want to join our club? Ask the new member this so that you can give them a suitable mentor. So it wasn't a personal attack on me trying to analyze my motives and criticize my reasons for joining the club. It was trying to be helpful. But that's what happens if things get shortened. People project into it. Well, if I had simply said, why are you asking? Then he would have said, standard question on the form. Then I would have said,
but that gets it comes out in the wash, doesn't it? I was going to say something now as well, personally, that you could help me with. I have a terrible, I'm going to call it a phobia of doing my CV in a covering letter. And there's a job that I really want. This is the true thing happening topical right now. I want to apply for this job, which would be amazing. And I can't bring myself to write my CV.
It's okay. Just pretend you're somebody else, like you're running a coaching firm. Pretend you're running a CV firm. Sit down and look at your CV and say, yes, dear, what is it you're going to put across the top as your title? What do you want them to see first? If they don't read through the whole thing, what do you want to have at the top?
Right.
What is it they've asked for in their job spec, and can you do it? What are your credentials? Do you have a story about a success? How long will you stay with these people? How do they know you're? I was once rejected by a company. I was so upset. I went to work applied for a job at Michelin. It was my dream job.
Right.
I told them how I'd done sub-editing in other places, and they sort of listened. And then I tried to show them how creative I was, and they listened. And they were sort of losing interest. And then I kept showing them more things and bringing out things I've done. And then at the end of the interview, I said, thank you. And they sort of said, thank you. And I said, do you think I'm going to get the job?
Yeah.
And they said, we have a few other people to see, but at the moment, probably not. And I said, why not? They said, because you're overqualified, you'll get bored and leave. So that all the time I'd been trying to show them how creative and interesting I was.
Oh no.
Had the opposite effect. Right. They simply wanted someone who was straightforward, meticulous, and would do the job.
Yeah.
And if only I'd stopped and said, what are you looking for? And if they had said that, I would have said yes. And if they had said to me, our last person walked out, we want someone who's going to stick at this job, I would have said, you're my dream company, you're a famous company, you're world famous, and you're round the corner from me. Why would I travel all the way into London when I can come and do a job which I can't get fired from, because I know I can do it easily because it's a straightforward job. This is my dream job, and I will be a devoted and permanent employee. I'm local. I do the job.
Mm.
And maybe I'd have got the job, but I'm still going over it years later.
Understand, yeah, of course. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I understand that, you know, wouldn't you have sort of wanted to, wouldn't you have had aspirations though, you know, starting off where you were? Like, for example, when I joined as a lecturer at Temasek Poly, I knew I didn't want to be a manager. I knew I always wanted to be sort of doing teaching for the most of it, which is not what happens when you're a lecturer. You actually end up doing other things. But anyway, you could have had aspirations for a higher post, you know? And then they would have been left in the lurch with your job being vacant. Anyhow, that's probably not an interesting question. So thank you for answering that. That helps me.
But then it helps me to know how long do most people stay in this job, and how long do you want me to stay in this job?
Yeah, exactly.
And can I guarantee that I will do that? Why would I want to stay that long in this job?
Yeah.
Then the answer I gave you earlier would apply.
Marvelous. And that segues very nicely into our next section, which is all about how to get yourself started when you sit down and start and you've got a blank page. You know, the sort of you know, I don't talk about everything as being fear. I think it's really overused and it's often a misnomer, right? We talk about everything, but you know, in Singapore, they'll say, "Oh, I scared it might rain. I scared." Well, why are you scared of rain? Kind of thing. I scared later, you know, run out of food, something like that. And it's nothing to be scared of at all. It's just something to be aware of, right? So, what are the things? How do you recommend people actually get started when they've got time and the space and they sat down to write and nothing comes to mind? That's the real writer's block, isn't it? When you've got an idea but you don't know where to start.
There are two ways. Well, there are always three ways to do anything. Number one, you start with where you are. What do you care about? What do you want to write about? And you do a kind of spider diagram going in all directions, all the ideas you've got on the subject. If you've got no idea, don't care what you write about, well, you just open the newspaper and wait till something grabs you and you think, God, that's outrageous. Somebody shot somebody. There shouldn't be guns. So then
Right.
you've got a character, the woman who wants to ban guns, but maybe her husband is a gun owner. What's going to happen? Is he going to threaten her and he finds out that she's the anonymous person who's opposing gun control or something? And there you've got your story.
Right. So that would be for a fictional piece then?
Yes. Or even for if you want to write a campaign, you want to be known.
Yeah.
Write a book. You don't have to run a campaign. You could do a BBC type piece, the arguments for and against gun control. A comparison of guns around the world. Which countries have the most guns? Which states in America have the most guns? Which have the highest gun range? Things like that. Depends how much work you want to put into it. And whether you want to tell personal stories or whether you want to show statistics. Up to you.
So what do you say to people who say, like T. Harv Eker, he says, oh, you know, a book is not a book anymore, it won't make you money. It's your book is the new name card. Or, you know, books are the new name card, books are the new business card. What do you say about that?
Yes, that is why a lot of famous authors have 2 or 3 pen names, because I mean, J.K. Rowling was one, and there are many others. They get known for writing science fiction, and then they want to write a romance novel.
Right.
If you want to make money, you might write one kind of book because that's where your heart is. And another kind of book because you know it sells. You might find that a book on fishing or gardening or cooking potatoes is going to sell, whereas your heart is a romance is set in rural Ireland in the 80s.
Right.
So, and the alternative is just to churn books out. There are people who make money. They don't even write their own books. They have an idea for a book. they go on to Fiverr, they commission someone to write a book, they send it out, and every day they put out a new book, and they might put out 100 books, 99 of them don't sell anything, and one of them becomes a bestseller.
Right.
And that's what they need. And that was a very interesting thing I found out when my when my son went into a headhunting business, because a lot of authors will write a novel, send it out to a publisher, sit and wait 6 months, it comes back rejected, and then they're miserable and they don't write anything for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
Headhunter wouldn't do that. They have a list of 1,000 names. They ring a number, the answer is no. They ring the next number, the answer is no. They ring another number, the answer is no. And they keep on going. And all they need is one yes in the month to get them their £2,000 or whatever their commission is, that's their payment for that month. And similarly, if you were writing short stories, we had a course by a well-known short story writer. She doesn't send off a short story, wait for it to come back and cry if it gets rejected. She writes a short story every day and sends it off. Then she writes one the next day, sends it off. By the time the first one comes back, if it's rejected, she's forgotten all about it. She looks at it with a new light, thinks, why did they reject it? Maybe I could improve it by doing A, B, and C. She then sends off the improved version to someone else, and then she goes on with the next project for the day. She's got a continual turnover of stories so that she's got an income, and she's got the morale booster of maybe 1 in 10 or 1 in 100 or 1 in however many. She's building up numbers of successfully published stories to boost her morale and her reputation.
And her motivation, yeah, I imagine.
Yes.
Yeah. So which brings me to the next one very neatly. I don't think we've discussed Elizabeth Gilbert before, but apparently, I mean, I've read bits and bobs here and there, but it's all hearsay. But apparently after the success of Eat, Pray, Love, she was sort of stymied and had, a block, and was like, well, how can I sort of surpass myself, because everybody will expect me to do something better in my next book.
Sorry,
Elizabeth Gilbert.
Who is this?
Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote Eat, Pray, Love.
Oh, right, yes.
So apparently after all of that, the success of all of that, she realized that she was sort of stuck because she didn't know how to fill the shoes of Eat, Pray, Love.
Well, that was probably because she had not done what the short story writer had suggested and what most publishers suggest.
Yeah.
A lot of publishers say they're not interested in a book, and literary agents the same. They want a trilogy.
Right.
If it's fiction, it's 3 related books, and if it's non-fiction, it's 3 books on the same subject, or even 3 books on different subjects.
Right.
There are 2 good reasons for this. One is so that, having chosen you out of all the other people they could have chosen, they can quickly go back and sign up another book if your book is a success. And secondly, there are economic advantages. They can go into a bookshop and say, this is the author, you've already sold her books, here is another one. So the bookshop is more likely to take it.
Right.
And then there are a lot of companies that will sell you things in 2s and 3s. For example, they might sell you 3 advertisements. Now, you might put in 3 advertisements for the same book, or you might put 3 advertisements for 3 different books. So they want to have 2 more books, not be spending all their money on one book, so that they can be using their ongoing commitments to the advertising. Then they've hired a company for a year to promote your book, and maybe you only promote a book for the first 6 months. What do they do the second 6 months of the year? They want to then bring out the second book and still get their money's worth from the PR agency or the bookshop rep who's going around the bookshops. He's been all around the bookshops with the book once. If he knocks on the door and says, here's this book again, they'll say, yeah, we've already got it. He wants to knock on the door and say, hey, we've got a new book by this author. Have a look at this one. So the publishers are looking for a trilogy. So if you've written a trilogy, it's the same as the short story problem. She's got the opposite problem. She hasn't got a short story that's rejected, and then she doesn't want to do another one. She's got one that's so successful, she doesn't know it's going to be as good.
Yeah.
But she'd had the 3 of them already. The second one could be out in preparation already with the publisher, with an editor looking at it and making it the second one. And if it's not as good as the second one, well, then you have to do a sequel, don't you? Or a prequel. If you can't find another character as interesting as in Inspector A, you have to do another book on Inspector A. And if you were exhausted with Inspector A, you would make a new book about Inspector B or the Inspector's wife.
Or do a spin-off on Inspector C, who was in Inspector A's first book.
Oh,
at which point, I'm very craftily changing my background to show the pictures of the first 3 books in this series. The first being the yellow one, Anxiety in Us, and then there was Sadness in Us. Third one being Anger in Us, which is stuck in delivery somewhere. My physical copies are, but it's out on Kindle. They're all out on Kindle. And this 4th one that you're contributing to is called Fear in Us, which is due in the middle of June. Very excitingly. So yes, there we go. And
my chapter is on fear of writing.
Yes, overcoming writer's block, indeed. Which is amazing, and it's going to get very well fit in really well, because that will help people then who are thinking about writing for the next one. So my whole reason for this, my whole raison d'etre, is to be able to help aspiring neurodivergent therapists to write their books. You know, because neurodivergent people don't work with deadlines, and they don't work with all sorts of constraints and things like that, and I help them. Which is what this has all been about. I hope you find that fun. Now, tell us a little bit, Angela, about your different kinds of works. What we can find with, you know, that's out there by Angela Lansbury. So just walk us through your different masterpieces.
Right. Well, these are my earliest books, which are now out of date, but they're still very good, and you can get them second hand.
Hold it up, like that. Now it's showing. Hold on. I'll stop you when we can see it. We can't see it, darling. Is that you've got there we go. That, like, hold them just like that.
And it was published. There were only 2. And if somebody said, I've got 2 books on how to be the best man, I'd say, yes, one of them is mine. And then a few years later, there were 4, and then there were 8, and now they're probably umpteen. But at the time, it was the bestseller because there were only 2. Then much later, I then went into poetry, and I wrote the poetry workshop book. And as I explained earlier, it's got the quotation by the poets at the beginning. It's got sample poems and spaces for you to write in your poems. And at the back, it tells you the most handy thing is the kinds of poems there are, and for example, what is a sonnet? If you can't remember the difference between a Spenserian sonnet and then you can read how it goes. So that's that. Then later on, I wanted to do my own thing.
Right.
You won't find this online. This is a private book. This is what I did for my late mother-in-law, Pearl. This is a family book. I was telling you how to do that.
Yes.
Then more recently, my 2 on quotations, quick quotations for successful speeches. These are one-liners. That's a thin book. And who said what when? This is if you're president of a club and you want somebody who said something on this day of the year.
Oh, how clever.
And then the books which will be online soon are, the next one will be on alliteration. It's a very minority subject. Nobody's done it. I'll be the only one. So excellent. To my prospective 3 readers, I'm looking forward to you buying my book, because it'll just be you and me.
Well, 4, because I'm one as well. I'll get it.
Right. And then it comes to my chapter in Carolyn's book.
Marvelous, marvelous. And is there anything else we'd like to leave our dear people with? I don't like to say, oh, our dear friends. I don't like to say that. Our dear audience.
Dear people, dear audience, you can connect with me on Facebook. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. And please read my blogs. I have 20, but there are only 3 that are really active. The main one is Travel with Angela Lansbury. And you might say, I'm not traveling, so what am I doing? I'm researching places. I'm writing about goods you can buy and where they come from and how you can reproduce them from your own recipe. And then I've got Dress of the Day, which has me telling you where you can buy a dicky or
I love that.
A cape blazer or the headphones. So if you're interested in
I need the cape blazer so bad.
Any of my outfits, look for Dress of the Day Angela. They're on Blogspot. Oh dear. Blogspot.com. This confused me for the first 6 months because you write on blogger.com if you're a blogger. But when the readers go on to blogger.com, they can't get into your site unless they know your password because they're not the blogger. They go on to something else called Blogspot. So I would go on to blogger.com, copy what was at the top in the line across the top and think that was the link. No, you have to go on to view your blog if you're writing a blog and then copy the bit that the reader will view, which says blogspot.com.
Right.
Oh. So you look for Angela Lansbury on blogspot.com, Travel with Angela Lansbury or Dress of the Day Angela on blogspot.com. And if you can spot me, wonderful.
Yes, fantastic. Marvelous. I think that's all we wanted to talk about. Do you?
Yes.
No, I do know you need 60 minutes of content, so we'll see how long this one is, and then we can do it as part 2 to fill in the rest. But I have a feeling we've been going for an hour, I think so.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. You have been an entertainment, and I'm sure this is all very educational for everyone.
Indeed, that's our forte, isn't it? Being educationally entertaining. Just like our beloved Ralph C. Smedley, who started the Toastmasters movement.
Ah, may I put in an ad for my clubs?
You may.
Please come to Bradle Heights Advanced. It's an advanced club. It's for people like me who speak advanced English or people who cannot speak English very well, who want to advance their speaking of English, and for people who want to advance their speeches and learn how to be humorous.
Advance in their conversation and rapport with the audience.
Props and how to focus on the point. Bradle Heights Advanced meets online on, look at my hands, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the first Wednesday of the month. 1, 2, 3, and the third Saturday afternoon of the month, Singapore time. But if you link up with me, you will find a link that tells you what time it is in your area. Singapore time is the same as Hong Kong time, China time,
Malaysia.
1 hour of Japanese time, 1 hour of Indonesia and Korean time, and people even in Switzerland and England can just about manage some of the meetings because some are afternoon, some are evening. So
it's British summertime +7, which is the same as UTC, isn't it?
Yes, which is not the same as GMT because GMT is 8, but because of British summertime, it's British summertime at 7. Oh, that confused me for weeks. Anyway, I'm also a member of several other clubs, where you can also see me. And if you want to be a committee member of a club, Bradle Heights has a couple of committee places. You could even be a president if you've missed out on another club being president, someone else got voted in. We're 2 or 3 of us are willing to swap roles so that you can have the role you want in our club, because we want more people. And there are lots of clubs that want more people, but come to mine, because then you'll be my friend on my committee and you'll learn from me. Thank you for allowing me to do that little ad for Paddle-Heights Advanced.
Equally, you could come to my clubs and see the two of us.
Yes.
Often we team up, don't we? We often team up
Yes.
in different
We help
ways.
each other.
That's right. And it's lots of fun. Okie dokie. Shall we sign off then? And we can possibly do a part 2, part 3, part 4, part 1 million.
Stay safe and keep writing.
Love it. Bye, everybody. Now, I'm going to end the